because that's what they do. Now, for some reason, we've had a role reversal over the last 3 decades, and it's becoming the left that is attacking the Bill of Rights. And the most interesting parallel that I can draw historically is about 100 years ago when the Nazis were trying to come to power in Germany. One of the methods they used was to control the means of communication. Right now, we have switched from print media, books, magazines, periodicals, and newspapers, and to an extent, network television, where news was a 15-minute, maybe 30-minute, maybe hourly phenomenon. Now, thanks to CNN, it's switched over to a 24/7 format. And social media, along with mainstream media, has been captured by the far left. And they are all well-meaning, but they adopted the phrase that black folk came up with in the 60s, which adopted some of the revolutionary rhetoric that had already existed. And that was, quote, by any means necessary, unquote. So the left has an agenda, and by any means necessary, they are attempting to do some very bad things to the Bill of Rights. They have long been against the Second Amendment, which enforces the citizens' ability to stand firm and, as a population, act as a check and balance to governmental authority. We have the governments broken down into the legislative function, the judicial function, and the executive function, so no one component gets all powerful. You have the federal system and the states, and those are checks and balances. And the ultimate one is an armed people cannot be oppressed. Now, the left has long been after the Second Amendment because substantially one of their problems is they lack manhood. For the last 50 years, they have been pushing the effeminization and emasculation of the country. Men are supposed to be soft and emotional and not supposed to be so logical, reasonable, rational, and analytical, because those things back in the late 60s were said to cause war. And there was a perception that the way to stop war was to raise boys like they were girls so they would act like girls and not be so warlike. That combined with the nascent lesbian movement that was going on, the feminist movement that had been there, what we now call the beta soy boys who could not fit into the white man's world, and they were aggrieved. And when you put them all together, you got a mess. And I heard them all over the country in various campuses plotting on their 25-year, 50-year, and 100-year program. So we're right up on the 50-year program, and they seem to have been quite successful. Unfortunately for them, they ran afoul of B.B. King's admonition: never make your move too soon. And what they look like they're doing is they've run 10 kilometers and now they're sprinting the last 100 meters. So some of the glaring faults with their program are beginning to come out, like this tranny thing, and drag queen boys that can't make it in men's sports are competing against girls in full contact sports, hurting them and capturing everything because they claim to be girls. You got Malik Yoba saying he's not homosexual. He only likes women, but he says he likes chicks with dicks. Well, if it's got a dick, damn, it's a dude. But he says he's a woman. No, man, We're not going there. So we've got this kind of thing. And one of the worst things with that is the attack on the First Amendment, freedom of speech. See, what they're doing right now is they're trying to restrict speech so it does not make anybody uncomfortable. Now, no way, no how is speech supposed to be restricted because somebody feels uncomfortable. So I had an interesting professor 53 years ago. I was that person's teaching assistant. I might go back in and explain who that was, but I was taught that you can tell who your enemy is because the person that's putting out the propaganda that's negatively impacting the people is somebody or something that cannot be criticized or cannot be talked about harshly. Now you can say, and I hate to use it, nigger, you can say chink, you can say wetback, you can say all kinds of things, but if you say faggot, then everybody gets bent all out of shape because they control the media now. So Twitter, Facebook, Instagram will allow that derogatory set of terms to be used against anybody, but not their somebody's. Twitter put out an announcement late last year, and it said anyone who did name someone will be forever banned from Twitter. So what's dead naming? That's like calling Bruce Jenner instead of Caitlyn. So the funny thing about it is 2 weeks after they sent that out, Brucey boy said he was tired of being Caitlyn and wanted to go back to being Bruce. So see, that kind of protectivity for the favorite classes is bad. Orwell talked about it when he wrote that book Animal Farm in the 40s, and he said the animals had a revolution on the farm. They took it over and they had effectively a Bill of Rights, and one of them said all animals are equal. And then later on, the pigs did some things and they got in charge. So that provision became all animals are equal, but pigs are more equal than others. And that's what you get. If someone's uncomfortable, there's always an action, civil action for defamation of character, libel or slander. Libel's when you say it, slander's when you, well, libel's when you write it, slander's when you say it. So the defense to a defamation action is truth. Truth is an absolute defense to a claim of defamation of character. But they've gone beyond that, so you can't make anybody uncomfortable. You can see it in terms of how they have emasculated the perceptions of the country. Oh my God, he was bullied online and he killed himself. Oh my God. Well, let the weak somebody kill himself. We don't need him. See, and you can even see it. The mainstream media had Back to the Future. They're playing it this week, this month, because it's Halloween month on the Sci-Fi Channel and some other ones. And McFly, that's his family name, he travels back in time because his dad is a punk, right? And there's this guy that bullies his dad still, and they're all grown. So when he goes back, he encounters his dad and he gives his dad some backbone. So dad knocks the bully out at the prom. So when the kid comes back to the future, to the present, guess what? The bully, instead of bullying dad, works for dad, and he's dad's flunky. See, that stand up and be a man bit, which was portrayed in that movie, but that movie is 35 years old. So you see, in 35 years, you've got from a Hollywood movie that says you got to man up and stand up to a bully, and you have to be taught to have the fortitude, the guts, the balls, and the personal physical bravery to stand up to a bully. Even if you get jacked around, at least you stood up and you did some damage. But now they've come back to, oh my God, we must protect these children from being bullied. We must bring in the police, the educators, and the parents to stop this. And you can't be a man if you don't know how to deal with a bully, to learn how to bust him right in his mouth. Because there are a lot of things in the real world that will bully you. You know, I mean, and face it, we are humans. We are at the top of the food chain, and we prevailed over a whole lot of things that used to want to eat us for a breakfast snack, lunch, late night snack, dinner, main course. And now it's, oh my God, the polar bears are in danger. The ice caps are melting. You once used to be king of the forest. Now no more. You're in danger. The mother elephants have such a close bond with their calves. Poor Oscar, chained in the backyard through the winter, chained in the kennel, he'll never know love. Since 1995, among the ASPCA, American Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. Okay, but now they got it. Send it to BLM so we can afford it to work on the farms. Now the boys in blue are killing them. We need to save them. See, this whole thing has gotten crazy.
Well, you know what's funny? It's funny you say that, Judge, because just the other day I was out on a short run walk with my fiance, and we were talking about maybe getting a house built, and and she said, yeah, they were building over in that complex, but they had to stop. And I said, why did they stop? She said they found out that the eagles were having mating season, so they couldn't build anymore. Because I said, what? I said, if you take away all those jobs, it ain't gonna be mating season in nobody's house, because their wives are gonna be pissed because they ain't bringing home no money.
You know what our ASPCA is BLM. Organization since 1995 a month. We'll protect the endangered colored bipeds, and it's gotten crazy. And you see all these little ratchet vanilla flavored cupcakes out there where they riot, and you got 600,000, 1.5 million people in the city. And you got 150 people out there that are getting indulged and they getting the crap beat out of them like they would have 50 years ago. And they keep getting bailed out, and they get right back out there. Same 150 to 200 little ratchet vanilla cupcakes, and out of every 10 or 11, you'll see a chocolate sprinkle somewhere in there. They're having a Greenpeace thing. Oh, save the colored bipeds. They're endangered. They're being brutalized, Like we can't deal with our own stuff,
Let me ask you this, Judge Brown. And by the way, everybody who just came in, I'm speaking with the one and only Judge Joe Brown. Do me a favor, hit the thumbs up button. If you haven't done it yet, please hit the thumbs up button right now. So Judge Brown, I want to ask you this. This week, you came to my mind because there's been a lot of conversation. I mean, we talk about masculinity, a lot of conversation about Ice Cube, the rapper. He got together with a group of scholars and experts, and he created.
Yeah, that's where I was leading. See, what's happened is what Ice Cube is doing is exercising free speech. But the left is the enemy of free speech now. They want to suppress it because some of them are uncomfortable because Ice Cube is putting some reality out there. Now, that handkerchief head boy, Byron Allen, who I don't like because he tried to stab me in the back for CBS. And by the way, that whole thing about getting that channel he wanted, suing Comcast, it was a front for CBS. See, most people don't know this. CBS can't get on cable or satellite unless they go through Fox. So the millennials at all would not like CBS dealing with Fox. So the exception is if they have an affiliate that is minority related. So they were backing Byron Allen with access to their library of reruns, which Comcast was already showing. So in other words, why duplicate it? It was just a dodge and doing dog whistle stuff. We got to uphold the brother. They discriminating against black. No, it had nothing to do with his handkerchief head ass. He hadn't done a damn thing for black folk in his whole career. He's greedy and selfish, and he tried to set me up. We knew he was. We had some spies, and we knew what he was being told by his CBS masters, so we blocked it. But anyway, that's another long story. But see, what Comcast said is we've got One TV, which was founded by a sister, We've got Bounce TV on Comcast. And as a matter of fact, Bounce carries my 15-year catalog of reruns. And Bounce TV was founded by Martin Luther King III and Ambassador Andrew Young and two other brothers. So it's black. So they already had this, and the false propaganda that was being put out to black folk was that somehow or another he was being discriminated against. So every one of these rerun series that he wanted to play was already being run by Comcast. So when it went to the Supreme Court and everybody was out there dancing around, you know, well, my thing when somebody asked me was the Supreme Court's not even supposed to hear that because you don't want mob justice. Now, I'm going to come back to that in a second, talking about Dr. Cosby. But anyway, what happens is they sent it back because it was a sham anyway. And the issue was a finding of whether or not Comcast would make a profit if they carried their Allen stuff, which was CBS's stuff, or whether they'd take a loss. So they never dealt with that. They had a settlement. And what was really going on behind the scenes, according to my espionage network, is that CBS worked out an accommodation in order to get an access into cable and satellite without going through Fox by fronting it off on a minority. So we weren't helping out anybody black. So he interviewed Kama Sutra Harris, who is a scoundrel. And by the way, she's not black, damn it.
Wait, did you say Kama Sutra Harris?
Yeah.
We stopped there, but go ahead. I just
Kama Sutra Harris is what the LA Times was calling her 30 years ago when she was notoriously being covered in their second page in her little escapades with Mayor Willie Brown of San Francisco. They covered that she got a job through him with the medical facilities business. And she was in her early 20s, just got into law school, supposed to be a full-time student in law school. And she had a 15-hour-a-week gig and she was getting paid $72,000 a year. And this is 35 years ago. Then she went up to 20 hours a week and she got 120-some thousand a year for a part-time gig. And they were making jokes and cartoons about Mayor Willie Brown getting the bootay, and they started talking about Kama Sutra Harris. And she got this
you said 20 hours a week, over 100,000 a year.
120,000 a year.
And this was
25 years old. This back, yeah. So anyway, see what the game is? So then there are allegations that she couldn't get on at this law firm, so she started screwing assistant chief partner. No, not the partner. She started screwing an NBA player that the firm represented, so they hired her. She tried to get on with the DA's office. They detailed an alleged affair with the assistant director. Now, my ex-wife was born in the same hospital within the same 12-month period as Queen Harris. So I looked at the birth certificate that she's got out there, and it does not look the same. What it looks like is a birth certificate that came into use about 15 years later. And I've seen that one because I helped out two women that worked on my show to get duplicate copies of their birth certificates so they could get passports. Now, on that birth certificate, it says race, color, ethnicity of mother, and it says Caucasian. Where it says nationality of the father is blank, and where you put in for race or ethnicity, it says Jamaican. Now, see, some colored folk who aren't black folk, because they don't do what they need to do to educate themselves about the circumstances, think if you're Jamaican, you're black. But you see, Jamaica once used to be part of the British Empire. You know, it stretched, the sun never set on the British Empire. And it was then part of the Commonwealth. So there was a great association anywhere from Singapore and Hong Kong to India and Pakistan, Kenya, Nairobi was an interesting place if you wanted to go on safari. And of course, Nigeria and various places in South Africa once we got the bulls under control, So anyway, you got everybody in there. And I've been to Jamaica 35, 40 times over the last 30 some years. Guest of the government on my own, prime ministers have brought me in, the governor general one time, and they've got all these folk, white, yellow, red in there that are born in Jamaica and Jamaican citizens. And her father, who wrote the articles, he was not quoted, he wrote them. He's an engineer and he's articulate and he can write. He wrote the articles in some Jamaican periodicals. He said his daughter is a liar and a fraud. He says his ancestry is that of a Tamil Hindu Brahmin mixed with Irish. And her mother's background is a Tamil Hindu Brahmin, and she ain't got nothing to do with black folk. Now, if you look at pictures of Tamil Hindu Brahmins, they tend to be from dark to your complexion. They don't even get as light as I am, but they're called Caucasian, and they range from frizzy hair to long, thick, dark, wavy hair like her. So I know several people I worked with on my show that were Hindus, and they said, I thought they were black. No, I'm not. I am not black. I am a Hindu. I said, what? And a couple of them even wrote books about it where they passed for black. They just cut their hair off, so it didn't look wavy. And they started practicing talking American black, which is fairly easy for somebody to pick up, like Barry Soetoro, AKA Barack Obama, did. People that knew him from back when will attest he didn't sound like that when they knew him at first. But anyway, see, you can front off because black Americans think anybody with any color has got to be black, because we had that thing in America where one drop makes you what the drop is, statutes on all of the former Confederate states said any known colored ancestry will cause the person to be considered colored for purposes of these statutes, okay? The ones that they had. But you see, they were predated by some other statutes. Anyone with no more than X percentage of colored ancestry may apply to a court or chancellor in this state for a declaration of Caucasian status, so long as they have 2 white sponsors or whatever. You see what happened after the Civil War? All of these ultra-rich plantation owners who had lost all of their legitimate sons in the Civil War had some mostly white-looking sons by their favorite slave mistresses, who tended to be quadroon, mulatto, or octroon. And they wanted them to inherit it, because if they had no heirs, then all of the property would do what they call escheat to the state. So they had that on the books, and then they started modifying it, but they could not come up with what is known as a bill of attainder or an ex post facto penalty for something. So if you had been declared white up until the 1930s by an official action, what would happen is, even though they said any known colored ancestry will result in you being considered colored for purposes of the statute, that didn't apply to them. But see, black people in America, totally ignorant of what's happening in the rest of the world, they don't get it that to a great extent, what got imposed on us is a set of protocols that if we believed it, we would fit into it. Because you see, Indians and Pakistanis are considered Caucasian by every anthropologist in the world, even the Nazis. Semites, which included the Arabs, were considered by every anthropologist in the world to be Caucasian. Australian Aboriginals are dark, but very dark, but they're considered Caucasian. So we look at Kamala Harris and we go, oh, she's a sister like us. She was an AKA. And the AKAs are foolishly acting like a bunch of little girls running around. This is the first one of the black Greeks that's been nominated for vice president. No, hell no. Speaking from information and personal knowledge, Vice President Hubert Humphrey for Lyndon Baines Johnson and the Democratic Party candidate for president against Tricky Dick Nixon was an alpha phi alpha. He got made in the 1930s in a black frat because he was in Minnesota and he just wanted to swing that way. So we got you beat. But there was no question Hubert Humphrey was a white boy. Kamala Harris is a Caucasian. See, we confuse the color. In other words, you can be dark and not Negroid. You can be dark, but being Caucasoid. And you go down that. They've got some tan people, not TAN in terms of the color, in South Africa who click talk. Really weird. And they're dark, but they're called Caucasians. And the interesting thing is what the Bantu got down there about the same time the white Europeans did, and they basically exterminated most of them. But I knew two of them that went to UCLA 50 years ago, and they click talked. They did not articulate words. So it was interesting, but she's not black. She's a Caucasian. Not only is she Caucasian, she's something else. Anthropologically, she's what you call an Indo-Aryan. We have heard Aryan, you know, the Aryan Brotherhood, Adolf Hitler and the blonde-haired, blue-eyed Aryans, the ancestors of the Germans. Well, they were ancestors of the Germans, but they were not blonde-haired, blue-eyed. They looked like Kamala Harris. So if you get a collection of high-ranking Hindu Brahmin caste people, they all look like Kamala Harris, or maybe a little darker. So they were the ancestors of the Germans, but they weren't pale. They didn't come from the far north. They came from the Indus River Valley, which is where India is now. And that's why they are technically known as Indo Aryan.
So Judge, I'm curious then, what would be the incentive to want to be black?
Well, in other words, her thing was she's born in San Francisco. She grew up in Canada, kindergarten through 12th grade, though now she lies about it. They've got her high school album out, yearbook, and in it she talks about her experiences kindergarten through 12th grade. Canada. Then there was a thing where she tried to modify it to say she was in Northern California, which isn't the case. But what happened is they had a scholarship open up at Howard. So she wanted to take the scholarship, which was for black students. So she masquerades as black to get the scholarship.
Wow. So like a Rachel Dolezal type situation.
Yeah. I mean, it's not uncommon for this to happen. Now, ordinarily, we associate somebody with Indian with the nose and a few other things, but every one of them doesn't have the nose. That's the two castes down below the Brahmins. So what happens is we're used to, look, I got a problem with my computer. What can we do with this? We will try to help you. Can you go to and click on, and you get that kind of thing. And this is, where is the call coming from? It is from Calcutta. Now you don't even get Calcutta, but they're coming in. And one of the bad things about that woman is she's an Indian, the first Indian U.S. senator. And what is bad about it is her people are having a horrible problem. They've got a caste system. The very bottom are what you call the untouchables. If somebody in a higher caste brushes up against an untouchable, he or she is supposed to go through a purification ceremony because they are viewed as being so tainted. Their job, as far as the culture goes, is to chase and eat rats. That's about all they're good for. So you can have a PhD in physics, you can save the world and be a billionaire, but if you are in the untouchability caste from your parentage, you still are so filthy that if you brush up against somebody by accident, they have to be purified. So some Indian immigrants are bringing that nonsense over here. And she hasn't done anything in her position to do something about it. I thought was a beautiful sister that worked in my show for 2 years. She's dark skinned too. She said, "Brother, I'm not black. I am a Hindu." She said, "My father was in the warrior caste and he took an oath to the family of my mother to protect her. They fell in love, ran off, eloped, and got married. So we can't come back because they got a long-standing contract on their lives if they go back." So Kamala Harris hadn't done anything about that either.
Wow.
So,
Well, go ahead, Jim. Sorry, but I was going to show you something as you were speaking. I remember there was a guy from India, VJ something, and he wrote an article called "Why I Fake Being Black for Medical."
Yeah, there you go.
So that's an example. You see here, he just cut his hair off and just told everybody he was black, and he says he did it because of the scholarship situation. So I'm wondering how many thousands of people have done
There was a bunch of them. I had 3 people on my show that were fronting off being black. I said, "Why are you doing that?" Because they don't have any black people being assistant producers. So they're anxious to get somebody black so we can front off. See, that's how they roll. Everybody takes advantage of us when it's convenient, and we don't even recognize what's out there. But back to this whole thing about the fraud bit, we still have to deal with Ice Cube. Ice Cube is negotiating, and the Russians or the Soviets and the United States and Britain negotiated all during World War II. They became enemies after. The enemies, Japan and Germany, they got the Marshall Plan after World War II, and now everybody's got a German or a Japanese car up in their driveway. Toyota, Nissan, Infiniti, Lexus, Mitsubishi, or Mercedes, Audi, BMW, Volkswagen, you name it. So things happen because of commerce and exchange. But now what Ice Cube was working on is his platinum plan. That was to commit $500 billion to economic development for black folk. That ain't about nothing. Well, that is the same amount of money as the average defense budget over the last 20, 25 years. So if you can run the United States Army, Air Force, Navy, Marine Corps, Coast Guard, pay all the troops and build all the ships off of $500 billion, that certainly isn't going to hurt us for economic development. And the only 2 expenditures larger than that are the 2 largest in the country's history. It's the Bush administration's bailout bill for $700 billion and the Obama administration's $781 billion bailout bill. And both of them were for the benefit essentially of the Goldman Sachs, because the Democratic administrations have allowed Goldman Sachs to be exempt from the requirement that all banking institutions have to have a certain percentage of their accounts backed up by actual cash on deposit, either in their own vaults or with the Federal Reserve. They don't have to. They don't have to have a dime to cover any of their accounts, and they're allowed to do it because of Geithner's theory when he was their chief consultant. That was Obama's Treasury Secretary. The theory is they're so into this arcane discipline or art of high finance that only these special entities could do it, like Smith Barney, which has gone belly up, but Goldman Sachs is the only one that's still out there. So they knew so much that they got an exemption from the requirement that they back up their accounts with cash. So if anything tied them up, anything broke down, there's a danger that the whole world would have a severe depression, economic depression.
Mm-hmm.
So Geithner was their chief consultant, and he came up with an exception based on a loophole that they had allowed Target and Walmart to have for a very good reason. They did not wish to prosecute as many people as they had to do for bad checks written for groceries and other essentials. So they came up with a proposal to have check cashing cards or check cards or bank cards where you could spend no more than what you had on deposit, and that would be electronically verified and debited. Using that loophole, Geithner got it expanded through some astute lobbying to the likes of Goldman Sachs and Smith Barney. Now, Smith Barney is no more. Speaking of which, Geithner was the Treasury Secretary, but less than a year before, he pled out to tax evasion for a $28 million fraud of IRS. He got 6 months suspended, wow, a $42,000 fine. Now let's show you the difference in treatment. Wesley Snipes, the actor. Wesley Snipes was convicted of failure to file a complete set of returns. And I was present during some of the proceedings and testified at his sentencing hearing. And I was present when IRS announced that he overpaid his taxes to the extent of $250,000. And the judge asked him, and they said they had a check for Mr. Snipes for his refund on overpayment of taxes. So he got 3 years.
Wow.
And by the way, a lot of that was due to the incompetence of his trial counsel. I'll say the name, it was so bad. Meacham, out of Atlanta. The judge just said, for God's sake, Mr. Meacham, the court is trying to do something for all your clients. You have to do something to work with. Jesus Christ, Mr. Meacham, the court has done Mr. Snipes and you the favor of resetting the motion for new trial until after sentencing. That's on page 11 of your brief, about midway down. Now, would you move on and call some of these outstanding character witnesses whose letters the court has been reading and who have impressed the court greatly? And he kept going, Mr. Meacham, just stop, for Jesus Christ. We're going to take a 45-minute lunch, and you need to take heed of what the court has been telling you. Now, we need to hear from these character witnesses if the court can do anything. So he comes back, he puts this little 32-year-old white girl on there, and she doesn't know what the hell she's doing. And the coach says, stop, young lady. The coach swore you in so you could practice before it. You's only 32 years old. The coach been on this bench applying the sentencing guidelines for 4 years longer than you've been breathing air on this earth. Will you two stop and put on some character witnesses? So he decided the coach can't take it no longer. We are having a 10-minute recess. The first witness for Mr. Snipes, the coach gonna call Judge Brown, followed by Dr. Clifford Stewart, followed by Mr. Muhammad, followed by Colonel so-and-so. And then it got so bad, the government said, Your Honor, we moved that Mr. Snipes' bond be revoked for this appeal. He said denied. And as a matter of fact, the court has been so impressed by what Mr. Snipes has done for the U.S. government, it's going to order his passport returned. Mr. Snipes, please keep in touch and pay attention. And when you need to come back, you come back. But if you have to continue to go overseas to finish doing what you're doing, that's all right by the court. Your Honor, sit down. Sit down. I mean, it was ridiculous. But see, Geithner got out there, and they've got this little clique. See, one thing you have to keep in mind about this whole sordid picture is we think Barack Obama was one of us. He's not. First off, you have to know the answer to this question. Who is the richest man to ever be president of the United States?
Well, let me ask everybody in the chat. Who do you think is the richest president of the United States in American history? Put your answer in the chat. And then Judge Brown's going to enlighten us. Go ahead, sir.
It's Barack Obama. See, Barack Obama was adopted when he was about 2 years old by a gentleman known as Lolo Soetoro. Lolo Soetoro had two interesting positions. He was International Executive Vice President of Standard Oil. That's the predecessor for Exxon. He also ran the death squads for the Indonesian government. Now, right now, the Indonesian government has 240 million people. The United States has 330 million people. Indonesia right now is bigger than the United States was when it had that little nasty dust up in the Nam. So as head of the death squads, Indonesia was roughly twice the size of pre-war Nazi Germany. So his counterpart historically was Heinrich Himmler, or one of the people in the running the Nazi Gestapo. So he had a warrant outstanding against him that we studied 50 some years ago in comparative international law, alleging that he was responsible for the murder of between 500,000 and 750,000 people in Indonesia. And at the time when Barack Obama was adopted, Indonesia was listed by the US State Department as a communist country. But it seems that the US government blocked the extradition and apprehension of Lolo Soetoro because he, under contract, was running basically a spy network for the US government in China, North and South Korea, North Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, and Thailand. He also became, using that muscle, basically the Indonesian oil baron. So Standard Oil wanted to get into Indonesia because it might, in fact, and it's still not a matter that has been determined, it might, in fact, sit on top of the world's largest oil reserves. But under American law, they couldn't get into it. So they propped up their international vice president. Now, when Lolo Soetoro died, supposedly as the cumulative result of multiple car accidents, 3 of them over several years, sounds more like some I Spy work and a little bit of rough activity. But what happened is when he died, he was one of the 10 or 15 richest men on earth. And he left everything to an Indonesian trust fund, of which Barack Obama was a 1/3 equal beneficiary. So Business Insider, which is kind of a pat everybody on the back thing, was kind of bragging about it. And they reported that in 2018, his net income after taxes and expenses was $570 million on a draw of approximately $1.25 billion from his trust fund for the first time. So ain't nobody got that. And see, his trust fund invest heavily in British Petroleum. Goldman Sachs finances him. That law firm he and Michelle worked for, that firm handled his father's business, not his biological one, but the one that raised him. And I did something because I always thought he was a fake from years back. I looked up what they had to say about him on the Heritage Foundation. That's a far right think tank. And what they do is they give a report card to all of the congressmen and senators. They gave him their 3rd highest rating in the US Senate, a 94 plus thing for 2 years running. He both years had the lowest voting record in the Senate, but they gave him their 3rd highest rating out of 100 senators for the most conservative voting. He voted for just about everything. The person they gave the #1 rating to had a 95 rating. The second place had a 94 plus, and Barack had a 94, just a little bit less plus. So he's always supported all sorts of conservative causes. Now that Gulf oil blowout, rig blowout that BP was responsible for, 23 of their executives got indicted and Obama pardoned them because his trust fund invests in the doggone company. I mean, it's really insidious. And the other thing is too, you've seen that little thing where George W. feeds Michelle the candy and she giggles.
Yeah.
The inside joke is that's the same candy he was feeding her husband when he was 5, 6, and 7 years old. See, the
Wow.
Bush family and the Sotoros were lifelong friends. See, George Herbert Walker Bush had a company called Zapata Oil and a holding company chartered in Kuwait known as Zapata Offshore Oil, Inc. So they were into energy development. So over a long period of time, George Herbert Walker Bush was dealing with Lolo Sotoro as the executive vice president international for Standard Oil. So when Lolo Sotoro was doing his thing on a contract basis with the CIA during the 60s, well, 1974, George Herbert Walker Bush became director of the study, just collaborated on a lot of around together. Now, they did a gag thing where they got tested, and CNN, for whatever it's worth, reported it. Guess who turns out to be cousins? George Herbert Walker Bush and his son, George W. Bush, are cousins with Barack Obama. They're cousins with Dick Cheney. They're cousins with Warren Buffett. And they're cousins with Brad Pitt, the actor. Now, they got a gentleman, very impressive gentleman, that is responsible for all of this. And I have to give it to him. Must have some powerful genetics. This guy's name
By the way, are y'all freaked out as much as I am? This is amazing.
This guy's name is Samuel Hinckley of Cape Cod. He's got 7 U.S. presidents and 1 vice president of the United States that are his direct descendants. He's got 9 billionaires, 174 multimillionaires that are his descendants.
Wow.
He was interesting. He was a French Huguenot, and he indentured himself for transportation from France to the colonies because he was a Protestant, and they were kind of coming down on them in the 100 Years' War. So to escape persecution, he became an indentured servant for a number of years. So he founded a line with all of this coming out of it. So Barack Obama is related to him through his mother. Now, the interesting thing about his mama is that on her side, he's got great grandparents who were Confederate officers. Get that? So they were fighting to keep slavery. So that assumes somebody like us, we all love this guy because he's supposed to be one of us. But like Thurgood Marshall said when he retired, he said, everybody asked me about this, who's going to be my replacement, at least the nominee. I can't say out of ethics, but let me say this. A black snake will bite you just as quick as a white one will.
Yeah.
We got nothing for 8 years. And even, what about Obamacare? Well, the truth of the matter is I know the man that drafted Obamacare, and he brags about it. His name is Dr. Bill Frist of Tennessee, formerly the senior U.S. senator from the state of Tennessee, formerly the Republican Senate majority leader who drafted it. His family founded Blue Cross, Blue Shield, and most of the HMOs and medical insurance companies, and they control it. And trust me, as a type 2 diabetic who has to get 7 medications every damn day, I know that Obamacare is a damn fraud. And my insurance went up 37% within 60 days of Obamacare going into effect in 2010. And after reading the act itself, I discovered that a whole lot of money, basically 100% of the cost of the pharmaceuticals, are being paid to the medical insurance company that could be paid directly to the people or could acquire medical insurance or the equivalent for the whole American public. But the Frist family is filthy damn rich now, and they will be for generations to come thanks to
Obamacare. Or
Yeah.
wow.
So, I mean, it's poisonous. Now, getting back to this other thing, we touched on demonstrating outside of the Supreme Court. That is an effort to promote mob justice. We saw that with Dr. Cosby. As a retired state judge, I was embarrassed. I was ashamed by what happened. That is one of the worst miscarriages of justice I've ever seen. The judge lost control of his circumstances, or actually seems to have encouraged the violations. He let people demonstrate inside the courtroom. He let these demonstrations occur outside of the courthouse, over which he has jurisdiction, while his jurors are looking out of the windows from the floor above as half-naked women are running around with red paint on, saying, convict him, convict him. And he didn't do anything about one juror who is recorded as saying, recorded contemporaneous with the conversation being had. He's talking to his brother, and his brother's saying, don't forget the book deal. You know what you got to do in terms of the verdict. You know, nothing was done about that. The judge took almost 8 months to prepare something. He had 60 days to send in so the appeal could proceed. And most importantly, we go back to this thing about the far left destroying the Bill of Rights. Fifth Amendment, you have a right to be free from self-incrimination. Well, when this woman filed this civil action first, Cosby's counsel said, we've got a Fifth Amendment right here. You can't make him take a deposition or answer any questions, because he can claim I have a right to remain silent because anything I say can and may be used in evidence against me. Well, the district attorney's office issued an official letter saying that we have no intention of prosecuting Mr. Cosby. At that point, the civil judge said, well, since there's no Fifth Amendment jeopardy and this is a civil matter, the court's going to compel you to participate in this deposition, and you must answer truthfully. So he did, and as soon as that happened, well, you got a new DA said, well, we revoked that. We're not bound by it because I'm a new DA. We're going to use his deposition as our case in chief to get him convicted, which is exactly what they did. The Fifth Amendment was not intended to be worked that way. And see, that's mob justice yielding the hashtag Me Too. And what's behind it is a sham. See, Bill Cosby once before had gotten the financial package together to buy NBC, and it wouldn't have been an Oprah Winfrey owned thing. He would have controlled NBC, and I think we would have seen some different kind of content that might have been helpful, since Cosby has always been interested in his people. Then what happened is he put it together again, and he was 2 weeks off of acquiring NBC when they hit him with the indictments.
Wow.
See, that is not cool.
Wow.
And see, I'm particularly sensitive to what happened. I hadn't had my 15-year-long show but a month and a half, so they had it to Beverly Hilton. I think that was, Beverly Hilton in LA. That's where Wilshire crosses Santa Monica Boulevard. And they had a big fit there. And, you know, I was a bachelor. I'm in my early 50s, and they got all these beautiful movie stars and everything around and about. So I was having a good time dancing. So I kind of hooked up with this one sister, and we sat down and we got to talking. And she got up and excused herself to go to the ladies' room. Well, she came back and she says, let me ask you a question. You know that tall guy over there in that gray suit? I said, yeah. He said he walked up with $2,000 cash in his hand, saying that he'd give it to me if I signed a note saying you were trying to feel on me. I said, damn. So we went around and found all of the women that I danced with, and they all said he had approached and made the same offer. So we got statements from them, and we wound up having to create a fictional woman through a beautiful sister that wound up being my publicist. And she did her thing, and they thought it was real, but we filed all of these affidavits detailing what we were doing, had them under a wax seal deposited in a lockbox, basically, with human resources. And when they started talking about me molesting women, I had them brought it over because they had this letter from this fictional woman claiming that I had indecently propositioned her. So when it all got brought out, well, they weren't there 6 weeks and I was there for another 14 years, so it was what it was. But you see, they do that kind of low down thing because they are filthy. They have no principles. They have no understanding. They have needs for cash flow, and they depend upon black people. See, black people bailed Hollywood out of bankruptcy back in the late 60s with the blaxploitation movies, or at least the movie industry has contrasted with the television aspect of it. See, back in the 60s, it was all local stations that had a national affiliation: ABC, NBC, CBS. Now we have this blending where you've got affiliations ABC and Disney, but back then it was Warner Brothers, Paramount, Columbia, and such like. Now they've all sort of mixed in, but Columbia, Paramount, Warner Brothers, they were going bankrupt because of color TV. So they depended upon blaxploitation movies to bring in cash flow. Now back to this issue right here. Anybody remember So You Want to Be a Millionaire?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The people from You Want to Be a Millionaire wound up suing ABC and Disney. They were asking for about $6-7 million. All right. They won. Kept getting appealed. They won on the California Supreme Court. ABC, Disney, to delay this, they thought they would wait them out. They filed in federal court. So it went all the way up to the Ninth Circuit. 3-member panel ruled for the original plaintiffs. Well, the Ninth Circuit, on the full panel, 9-member panel, reaffirmed, and they said, we're going to modify it. Instead of the $7 million, they said, we're going to teach them using punitive damages, which cannot be bankrupted, that rule 1 of American contract law is all parties have to deal with each other in good faith. You know what the final judgment was? $680 million. And when they appealed it, by the time the Supreme Court denied cert, the interest had driven it up to $1.2 billion. So what happens, see, is the studios don't have that kind of cash flow because everything is credit and financed and all of the rest. So effectively, the plaintiffs wound up owning the income to all of the major rides at Disney World, Disneyland, and they could walk in any place in the country, and they still do, to levy and execute on ABC properties. So they needed a big chunk of cash to pay off the interest at the time. So they came out with Black Panther. And I've heard them and had heated arguments and discussions with them about their formula for bringing in black folk, and it's really insulting, but I won't go into it. But now let's take the Black Panther movie. Remember the last big battle going on? It was the women of the tribe and the men of the tribe trying to kill each other off. The women of the tribe had committed treason and gone outside the country to recruit some other black men. But did you note where they lived? Now, this is Africa, but they were living up where there was permanent snow, and they were living in caves. What's the inference? In other words, men are cavemen. All right. Now, this is Wakanda, right? With 500 years advanced technology on everybody, but they can't find a black man who is a Wakandian to fly the virtual fighter plane. They got to get a white CIA type. All right.
Yeah, that was very weird. That white guy was just completely out of place.
Yeah.
In that movie.
You see, he's supposed to be the king, but he's running around in tights playing vigilante. Instead of taking bare business. His mother ran the government. His aunt was the prime minister. The only male in there was that fool with the lip disc in, with that orange and lime green sport coat outfit he had on later. The women ran everything, and his so-called bodyguards that walked in with him everywhere, so he looked like a pimp with two hoes on his arm. They ran him, they nagged him, told him what to do, and kept him under control. His father had killed Killmonger's father. Killmonger's father, remember, was living in the projects on the West Coast, and he was being father to all these boys and teaching them whatever. Killmonger graduated from MIT with a PhD, a doctorate in astrophysics and engineering. So he was a rocket scientist. He joins the Navy, becomes a SEAL. He's so good at killing, he becomes Killmonger. He's plotting a revolution to unify Africa, and unifying Africa wound up controlling the world and imposing world peace. And he started saying stuff from W.E.B. Du Bois, Frederick Douglass, Marcus Garvey, Malcolm X, H. Rap Brown, even a few things by King, but they put the words in the mouth of the villain. Now, the interesting thing is when Stan Lee wrote Black Panther, he had the character of the Black Panther was very closely proximate to Killmonger's in the movie. And Killmonger in the magazines was a drug dealer who was also dealing with sex trafficking in Africa, which is how he got involved in the first place, not just playing vigilante.
Interesting.
So they switched, so the villain became the king, and the king in the comic book became the villain. So young kids listening to the villain would associate negativity with these things that were helpful. And guess what? They paid down their interest. So there's another thing they did that's got to do with this effort to emasculate. The actor that played Black Panther died of colon cancer. They had him playing Thurgood Marshall. He looks nothing like Thurgood Marshall. They had him playing Jackie Robinson. He looks nothing like Jackie Robinson. They had him playing James Brown, but he looks nothing like James Brown. But if you want to see what the real deal was, based on what I know from these people that work out there, is watch Gods of Egypt. It's still on. It's playing because it's Halloween. It's kind of sci-fi, historical, supernatural. And the God of wisdom, the Egyptian God of wisdom, is a flamer. I mean, he's way off into the gay side, same actor. So in other words, I know from listening to them, they do this thing where they want the kids to associate fluidity. So you got musician, baseball player, athlete, Supreme Court justice, superhero, and flamer. That's fluidity. The same person can be all of them. See, and most people don't catch that.
Choosing your heroes for you, which is something that white folks have always wanted to choose who we saw as our heroes, right? Whether you're talking about civil rights movement, or you're talking about in Hollywood and all that stuff. And I want to ask you about this too. When I did recently, I spoke with Ice Cube about the weird backlash that he got from a lot of these being black folks, because he simply went to the Democrats and said, black people deserve a better deal. So the Democrats said, screw you. We don't want to give you a better deal. So he goes and talks to the Republicans, because he said supporting black people should be a bipartisan issue, right? And so they gave him all this stuff. Oh, you a Trump guy, you doing this, you doing that, whatever they said, right? And I said, I think the problem people have, and I want to hear your thoughts on this. I said, I think the problem people have with you and other black men standing up is that the Democrats are used to controlling a fatherless, feminized black community. They're not used to the men standing up.
Exactly. Okay, let's get historical briefly. The Democratic Party was founded very early in the 19th century for the specified purpose of spreading slavery. They had new territories they wanted to expand into. The Republican Party was founded 1851 on an abolitionist plank. In other words, they wanted to end slavery. The Democratic Party represented the Southern slave owners. All Southern slave owners were Democratic supporters, Democratic Party supporters. They were chartered to spread slavery. One of the methods of slavery that it was most insidious was for the slave masters to select senior black women to be leaders for the black people they held in slavery. Never a black man, always a black woman, and they'd pick them. And you see that still being done by the party of the slave masters, the Democratic Party, still are trying to suppress black masculinity. So they only recognize either, black males or black women. So they want to appeal to the black woman voter, but they want to suppress the black man voter. So when Ice Cube is doing something to get the black man back in the loop, instinctively the Democratic Party is opposed to that. Now, where I got that from is I worked for a DC think tank, half century ago as an intern. And my assignment was to study the slave pamphlets on microfilm in the Library of Congress. And that was the common thread. Always suppress any show of leadership by the black man and always deal with the black woman, never with the black man. So I find it interesting that the Democratic Party does that. So he wanted to open a dialogue. So, I hear all these people talking about Trump is a racist, but I just don't get it when I deal with Biden. And I remember Biden talking about, this intern thing I got wound up sending me to Delaware. So I was paying attention to this racist who at that point was campaigning for U.S. Senator. So while I'm in Delaware, here comes George Wallace in a wheelchair campaigning for Biden because he had impressed him as an intern. Strom Thurmond campaigning for Biden. John B. Stennis, the whole panoply of old line segregationists. And Biden was bragging about being the youngest remaining Dixiecrat in the Democratic Party. And he was talking about desegregation was an evil. He was talking about how proud he was that Delaware owned slaves and they knew how to handle the Negro. And he was upset that Delaware didn't go with the Confederacy. He said, I know how the Negro thinks. I know that they know I know what's best for them. And he was talking that stuff. They brought it back up. Negroes behave like animals. And where they are, there are zoos and there are jungles. And I'm not letting my children go to a jungle, go to a zoo populated by animals. I said, oh man, wow, you really hate that fool. And Faubus even came down there before he died. And then he gave the eulogy for Strom Thurmond, for God's sakes. This is Biden. And then, he was around there on TV and I was practicing law by then. I remember a speech he gave that was televised with the predecessor for what's now C-SPAN. He's going, one rock, one tiny rock, 5 years mandatory under the new sentencing guidelines that myself and the great Senator Strom Thurmond have been pushing. The judges will have no discretion. 5 years for one rock. And then the rest of it was 10 rocks was supposed to be equated sentence-wise with a kilo of pure cocaine. In other words, 10 rocks, you got 10 years. In other words, 1 year per rock after you get past that 5-year minimum for one rock.
Oh my God. That Judge Brown, I'm gonna tell you,
that was in 79, not 94. Everybody thinks that he really jacked us around with the 94 crime bill. The one that poisoned us was the one he and Strom Thurmond did, 79-80. That took away the power of federal judges to put somebody on probation, except for a designated series of crimes that were misdemeanors, and the person had to be youthful, which was 25 years and under, so that they could give him some relief. So we stopped plea bargaining in the federal system for time, and you did sentence. In other words, my client will plead out to something with a 5-year cap. So you had no control over the sentencing. The judge had no control because the guidelines were so detailed and strict, he had no discretion.
Wow.
So, you know, that's how you did it. You didn't go in, you know, plea bargain. It's just, okay, we'll let him plead the following so-and-so, and the rest of the charges will be dismissed. So it's like the other thing that's bad about the federal system, and this isn't legal advice, this is a word up. If you're being investigated by state detectives on something, whatever it may be, and you say, I don't know anything about it, to hell with you. I got nothing to say. I don't have anything I can tell you about this. Okay, Fifth Amendment. If you say that to the feds, you're going to get busted for making a false statement to a federal officer, because they will tell you, we're here to investigate you about potential allegations of tax fraud. If you say, I don't know anything about it, they just told you about it. So now you have falsified what you have said. And I'd represent people years ago, they'd have 15, 20, 27 counts on an indictment, get found guilty of 26 of them, and not guilty on 26, and guilty on one of them, which is making a knowingly false statement to a federal officer. So if you ever get interrogated by the FBI, IRS, anything like that, don't say you don't know. Don't try to give an explanation unless you want to give the explanation. But I mean, it has to be truthful. Otherwise, you just say, I decline to respond on the grounds it may tend to incriminate me. I exercise my Fifth Amendment. And nowadays, see, there is a ruling that a lot of police departments don't adhere to, and that is they don't have to advise you of that. But most police departments say it cuts down on a lot of confusion, so they do it anyway.
Wow.
Now, another thing, I'm looking at all these Democratic proposals on reforming the police, and from having been dealing with this subject for half a century, I'd say most of them are nonsense. The main thing that is not discussed in any of them is that what the police do to the citizenry depends upon the political clout of the citizenry. We had in Memphis a gentleman, I know him personally. I got his cell phone in my phone, and he's got mine in his. Used to help represent him. He got elected to mayor in 1991 in Memphis. He was the first African-American to be elected. First thing out of his mouth was, anybody who is director of police who does not get a handle on this inappropriate police conduct will be fired. You will find out about it when you get home and look at your TV, because I'll do it that quickly. He had been superintendent of schools. He had been undefeated Golden Gloves, super heavyweight boxer. He's 6'7". He's still got an attitude. I like it. He wasn't above punching somebody in the chest hard when he had a disagreement. But anyway, he fired 6 or 7 directors. And lo and behold, police being a paramilitary organization, stuff runs downhill. So it got so different from a place that had horrible police community relations. I can remember at the beginning of his 5th term in office, driving down the street, I was coming back from a visit, for a visit to check the house out from the West Coast. And I was just driving through the hood, and I saw some ladies that I knew because I'd represented one of them's nephew, and the other one I'd represented her late husband. And they were standing out on the corner with a tray and a thermos, and they had something covered over. Would you like some, Judge? No, thanks. I got a lunch appointment. So when the police came by, just happened to do that, they flagged them down. The officers waved and they went over, and it was coffee and donuts for the cops, and I knew them personally, what their attitude had been toward the police. So what the doc was doing about maintaining absolute control over the situation, it all got better. Now there's a movie that shows that. It's a Clint Eastwood movie. What is it? Pork Chop Hill or something like that. And he comes in as the new gunny sergeant, takes over this recon platoon, and they've got zero morale. They're totally out of control, and he kicks butt and puts them all in control. First they hate him, then they love him, all right? Because he does what men need, which is the imposition of discipline, authority, the assurance of order, propriety, and standards. He holds you tightly to that. You take pride in the ability of being able to rise to these high standards. That, by the way, is one of the bad things with the party policies of the Democratic Party about the emasculation of the country. Boys need causes. They need discipline, authority. They need structure, and it's taken away. And one of the things I do is a man up thing. And man up is a beautiful thing because it gives a kid a purpose. See, you can have a religion in a foxhole and somebody next to you, you got to defend him. You ain't worried about the national causes. Me and you, homeboy, we got to look out for each other. But if you give him manhood and he looks in the mirror, his cause becomes an intimate one. In other words, I have to be a man. That's my cause. Duty, honor, obligation, responsibility, making where I live a better, safer, more secure place filled with economic prosperity, safety, economics. I already said that one, in a sense of morality and ethics. I have these things. If I don't do what I'm supposed to do, I can't look at myself. I can't sleep at night. But if I do these things, then I'm okay. And when I deal with this, I don't say, yo, man, Judge, like mine's like this. I'm 19, man. I ain't gonna live to be 24, man. Why I need to worry about it? See, and I say, well, good. If you're not going to live to be 24, fool, do something that's supposed to be a manly thing. A lot of folk, they don't see the daylight at the end of the tunnel anymore like you, but it's your job as a man to get them through that tunnel and kill off the fire-breathing Gila monsters that are setting flames, setting fire to the place and making all the smoke obscure the daylight. Even if you die, at least you become a hero, because you don't die anyway. Life is not that long. There are a whole lot more miserable ways to die than being a hero. So go and do what you got to do. So in the morning you go, yeah, man, did I do, man? Did I do what I was supposed to do yesterday? Well, man, it was kind of a slip, homeboy. I know you, man. You can't hide nothing from me, man, because I'm you. That wasn't right what you, yeah, man, you're a little wrong. You gonna do better today, man? Yeah, man, I'm gonna do better, man. You promise, man? Because I ain't gonna let you sleep tonight, fool, if you don't do right. Yeah, man, well, I need my rest, man. Well, you ain't getting no rest if you ain't doing right. See, and there's that dialogue going on with self. So
that's right.
You get people doing what's going on. See, one of the problems with the violence in the country is not toxic masculinity, it's the lack of masculinity. See, you input masculine principles into a boy, you get a man who is a man of public peace, dignity, and order, who can be brave and courageous when necessary. He imposes peace. He keeps others from acting out of line when they don't have what he has. So when you get all these little creeps going crazy in the hallways, they lack masculinity. Every single one of them, when you get into it, it turns out he had a problem with bullies. He did not know how to deal with one. And when you deal with the boys in the hood, same problem. The mamas who aren't very good mamas because they started being mommy at 10, 11, 12, 10 years old, 13 years old, they're still children. And they were raised by somebody that wasn't a good mother, raised by somebody that wasn't a good mother, raised by somebody a good mother, and their great grandmama is still walking around and she ain't even 70 years old. So they don't teach manhood to these boys. So they are emotional. Like, why'd you do it, young man? Well, I was emotional, young. Well, give me a reason. I was emotional. That's not a reason. Okay. See, the difference, and I hate to put it this way, you take your typical hood rat, and there's no difference between him and a hood raised lesbian, except one's got a penis and the other one does not.
Wow.
Both of them are raised as girls. They like girls sexually. One of them has boy plumbing and the other one's got girl plumbing. If some fairy godmother waved a magic wand and the girl plumbing switched to boy plumbing, you'd have no difference, because they don't have manhood. Because, well, hell, let's say this. I actually wound up, when I had these counseling sessions before I retired from the bench. I did my show 2 years while I still was on the bench. I had all this built up vacation time I had not taken. So I wound up, interestingly enough, getting benefit of being able to have some made mafiosi come in and talk to these people I was counseling. It said, you got to have manhood in your soul. See, man, we don't allow these things to happen with our lady folk, our children, the old people. You come in and you poison your neighbors, you rape your neighbors, you burglarize your neighbors. We kill your fool by doing that. See, a man got to take care of what he got to take care of, even if you're into criminality. You don't have no criminality where you live. You know, you don't shit where you eat, you know? But you animals, you sit there, you saw the Godfather, there wasn't no lie. See, so, man, this dude, he's made man. He's telling you about manhood. See, and we don't get it because we had 50 years of glorification of dysfunction. We almost got over the crest so we could really build up speed in the late 60s, but they wound up infiltrating so many black organizations so that you had snitches, informants, provocateurs, and sworn officers and agents in the organization, that you had more of them than you had legit members. And they did a carefully calculated thing about destroying people. They even destroyed Martin Luther King, but not because of race issues. I mean, I was the last judge on that case, and the FBI supplied the weapon and the ammunition. The shot came from a two-man team from the fire station. It didn't come from the flop house or the bushes. And even the Civil Rights Museum that has finally acquired that flop house has gone through it, and they say the judge is right. The shot could not have come from here. So anyway, what they killed him for.
Judge, let me ask this question. When they were pointing, when everybody's...
Well, let me tell you why they were pointing.
Tell me about that.
The ammunition and the rifle setup was for a suppressed rifle to reduce the sound signature. The ammunition was subsonic. On an ordinary rifle, 30 caliber, what was happening was you'd get a 30 caliber bullet, 7.62 NATO, fired at maybe 2,700 feet per second, which is twice the speed of sound. So what happens is you would, in effect, hear the bullet hit the target, thump, and then you'd hear bang from the rifle. Everybody that was on that balcony said they heard the bang and then they heard the thump. The ammunition that they pulled out of King's body is consistent with some reduced velocity 7.62 NATO rounds. So what would happen is you would hear the bang first, you'd hear the thump, and by now you would hear the echo, which would be more strongly remembered, which would come in consistent with what you would think on a rifle shot. Now, we conducted some empirical experimentation, and if you set off a loud report right there under the windows where the shot came from, because once they would move aside, what happens is the echo cast it right back where the bushes are.
Okay.
So we did the experimentation. Interestingly enough, Ray had a 760 Game Master, interestingly enough, that was the standard issue to the FBI, so nobody would have paid a bit of attention with all of these FBI agents running around with pump action 870 12 gauge riot guns by Remington or pump action 760 Remington Game Masters in 30 caliber. See, the barrel that was on this rifle was very peculiar, and the ammunition or the bullet they pull out of King's body reveals a rate of rifling twist of 1 turn in every 11¼ inches. In other words, you go 11¼ inches, the bullet makes 1 revolution. Ray's rifle had a rate of rifling twist of 1 turn in every 10 inches, and the standard 7.62 that the military used had 1 turn in 12 inches. So the Army Marksmanship Unit cooked up 63 custom stainless barrels that had that, and then the 11¼ rate of rifling twist. And the Marine Corps unit at Quantico, where the FBI trains, also had some barrels made up like that, and they were rebarreling a lot of rifles with that caliber. So what happens is I stumbled on an invoice late December 1967 where the FBI received 5 of these M14s converted. They were known as XM21s, and the serial numbers are listed. I have that. King was shot in early April 1968. The Defense Department wanted these weapons back for the NOM because they were experimental. The FBI wouldn't give them back until the Justice Department ordered them to return it. So in late April, they did an inventory and they claimed they could only return 4 because 1 was lost. So here's the FBI losing an experimental weapon. So I have the serial numbers of the 4 they've returned and the serial numbers of the 5 they got. The missing rifle is the serial number that is not returned. They got several thousand rounds of the ammunition in question, which had to be specially hand loaded because no manufacturer made that stuff.
Wow.
So, I mean, it's like circumstantial evidence is pointing the finger right there. But that being the case, they did not kill him based on the memoranda we have in the record. For black stuff, they killed him because they thought he would galvanize the anti-war movement and revitalize labor. Not because he was black, but because of those 2 things. See, the civil rights movement was always peaceful. It was just black folk down on their knees praying and somebody beating across head, whipping behind until some other folk felt guilty about it. So I know my old man, some of his buddies and some of the men they looked up to who had fought in World War I, World War II, and Korea was saying, look, man, you know, like I paid my dues. I bought my way into having equity in this system, but I'll be damned, nobody's going to beat me across the head. You raise your arm, you might not bring it back. You'd be missing one, you know? And also they used to talk about, we can't deal with that either. Now, that either has an absolute right to do that, but when they start trying to interject it into other things, then it gets to be a problem. Do it in your bedroom, that's your business. But when you try to bring it in my living room, my children or grandchildren may be in there, then it's my business and I don't want to look at it. So with that in, you know, there were rumors back then that Bayard Rustin, who was King's right-hand man, was deep into it. And Bayard Rustin was doing things to little teenage John Lewis, and it was notorious, you know, and people were very, that wasn't supposed to be happening. So I always ask my old man, what do you guys mean about this, Dad? Well, when you get old enough, I'll let you know. So I think I was either in the 9th or 10th grade, and I'm sitting at the table doing my homework. My old man dropped the second section of the LA Times on the table. He said, that's what we mean by. So it reflected that Bayard Rustin had been caught in the back seat of a car being sodomized by one guy, a white guy, while he Rustin was performing fellatio on another white guy. So it was in the paper that way. I'm saying, yeah, okay, that's what you mean. So he said, well, you can look that up in the dictionary. I did. I said, damn, damn.
Wow.
So now the LGBT community is trying to get the governor to pardon him, but that wouldn't be fair because there are a whole lot of straight kids that got caught doing it in the back seat of the car that don't have their records expunged. So why should he? That's more that all animals are equal except the pigs are more equal.
Wow. Well, well, please, did you have more to say?
But the most dangerous thing that we're actually looking at is what happened to Cosby, because that shows a deterioration in the respect to be given to the Fifth Amendment. The First Amendment, this thing of you can say anything you like as long as we say it's what should be said. Second Amendment, all you need to be disarm police department, which by the way is not really the truth. They're fronting it off because when you defund the police department, by most state law, that just throws the burden on the sheriff's department to pick up what was lost when the police department went up belly up. So what you do is you transfer the tax burden to the state at large rather than the locals having to pay for it. So you get stuff like take your booties to the poll. Why in the world would a conscientious black man be turned on by some bare behind and want to go vote and he doesn't deal with the issues? Now, the other thing too is in that take your booties to the poll that one of BET stars came up with. The kids would call her boule or bourgeoisie. We'd call them bourgeoisie, her. She's got some drag queens in there. So why would you be appealing to straight men with some drag queens showing their bare behinds dancing on the pole? Oh. It's like, what?
Wow.
And they'll deny it, but I had the woman on my show. She was very defensive. What do you know about being black? I said, well, young lady, I know a bit more about it than you do. I grew up in South Central LA, and I've kind of devoted my professional and private life to doing something about the situation. Yeah, okay, go ahead. Wow. So she tried to hide it, but what is what's the guy that was in South Carolina that got Biden
Clyburn.
She has been closely affiliated with Clyburn. Mm-hmm. And that's Clyburn that came up with that nonsense of Biden being an honorary black man. I don't know where the hell he's been. And obviously he didn't see what I saw, but heard or witnessed. Remember, I was there when it was going down. I was on the ground, like, who is this fool? So anyway, she's affiliated with Clyburn. Mm-hmm. And BLM provided some of the funding. She and another somebody put up a credit card, and under the tax law, this crowdfunding they have been trying to get for the project can be used to reimburse them for the credit card. And past that point, if anything comes in above and beyond it, well, they can keep it so long as they declare it to IRS and pay taxes on it. So it's nothing but a money-making hustle. But I find it interesting that a bourgeoisie young lady is going to start speaking for the strippers who she recruits and pays union scale for their work. So essentially they're just actors hired to do a fiction to get black men to the poll, which I found very insulting. But back to that Democratic Party, slaveholders party of taking black women to control black men. The same old.
Well, it's real interesting that that most of the attacks, like when Ice Cube went and negotiated with the Democrats, and the Democrats said basically fuck off, and so he went to the Trump team, And because he said we should be talking to everybody to get what's best for Black people. The biggest critics of him have actually been prominent Black women. Now, on this platform,
exactly.
Yeah, I did a poll, Judge, with the people, 100,000 people around in this space. I did a poll. 96% of the people said we approve of what Ice Cube is doing. But if you listen to media, it's almost like they talk about it like this Negro done lost his mind. What's wrong with him? This is crazy. This don't make no sense. I'm like, there's nothing irrational about stepping forward and standing up for your people and negotiating. I swear to you, it seems like so many people are just ass backward. Done lost their mind.
Now, remember I told her, which was this professor 53 years ago, I was her teaching assistant. She was a visiting professor emeritus from the University of Moscow. At the time, she had been the highest ranking woman ever on the Soviet Politburo. At one time, she was propaganda chief for the NKVD, which was the predecessor for the KGB. She had two people she answered to, Comrade Beria, chief of the secret police, and Comrade Stalin, premier of the Soviet Union. Those were her only two bosses. When Khrushchev was chief commissar during the Stalingrad siege in World War II, she was his deputy chief. So she's in this movie, for example, Enemy at the Gates. She's not the female spy. This is in Stalingrad. At the beginning of the movie, you see this female commissar who has got her Tokarev out shooting people who are panicking when the German planes are strafing in the back of the head. That's her. She was one bad lady. So she was telling me about propaganda methods. One of the things is control the media, and you can get people to believe that nobody but them thinks like they think, even though most people do. So you see, they've controlled most of the social media outlets, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. They have the mainstream media, except to an extent, Fox. So they're telling you that all of these people are attacking Ice Cube, and actually he just needs to tell them to go to hell, because if this is all of the Black people here, the part that don't like it or like this, but they're telling you this is this.
They're amplifying it.
They're blowing it up. One of the propaganda methods she talked, and she also said that she had studied Nazi propaganda intensively as part of her task while she was a professor. Her class was called The Soviet Sphere of Influence in World Politics. Very interesting thing. So she made me a teaching assistant, even though I was basically a senior, because she said, I'm Black, and she wanted to encourage Black people to get the knowledge they needed to deal with racism and oppression. So I got all these clues in. She'd sit down and talk to me for hours, and she'd say, now, if you see this, be on the lookout for the following. This usually happens. Now, if you see this, this is a clue. It was kind of like what in the Godfather movie. Remember, the old Don Corleone was telling Michael, oh, by the way, the person that come to you with the meeting, he's going to be the traitor. He's going to be the traitor. You know, like what to look out for. And seriously, once you had that background, a whole lot of stuff gets transparent. The other thing is let me say this, and I'll give you this perspective. All of these folk talk about, I have to do this because, I have to do, basically Hollywood won't let them do anything else if they're going to remain a star. That's crap. They don't have to do that. And I say this from this perspective. For the last 3 years that I had my show, I was beating Oprah in the ratings every week, but she's the superstar, not me. I was beating Phil in the ratings every week, but he's a superstar, not me. Ellen DeGeneres didn't even come on the radar. Her ratings were so bad, but she's a superstar, not me. Judge Judy was a superstar, not me, but I kept beating Judy. And every time I'd beat her, CBS would change our rating schedule so she would stay ahead. Now, all of these guys are talking about money, right? Well, guess what? I was the highest paid man, black or white, in all of Hollywood outside of the CEO for CBS, Leslie Moonves, who got canned in that little sex picadillo thing, you know? So they weren't going to let anybody know that a straight black man was the #1 dude in all of Hollywood when it came to the paycheck, let alone in the ratings. You know, they hid that. I mean, and see, in the Southwest, I was playing at prime time, 9, 10, and 11 for an hour format. I was beating Leno, the Tonight Show, you know, all of this stuff. But they did not ever release it because they didn't want it. Now, there was a guy named Roger King. His father invented syndication, Little Rascals, Three Stooges, Black, set up something called King World. Now, Roger King was a big guy. He's a football player, and he came in laterally. He didn't, you know, I always wanted to be. And he had a talk with me. He said, look, Judge, he said, I like you. You're a real man. And there's so real few real men in this Hollywood men thing. You got to stick together. So what are they doing to you? So I said, I did this trying to, he said, I don't like what they're doing. He said, bear with me and I'm going to make it. Now, he's the one that discovered Oprah and handled all her money for her so she got rich. He's the one that discovered Dr. Phil, not Oprah. But he gave the credit to her. Like I said, you can do all kinds of stuff. You don't need to take credit for it. He even thought enough of me to have me sit next to his 2 daughters at a banquet and explain the facts of life, which got kind of amusing, but I won't digress into that. When one of them was complaining about how come she can't find a man. That she looked like a movie star. She was a billionaire. She was working on a PhD, hadn't even hit 24. She couldn't find a man. So I told her. She says, damn, is that why? I said, yeah. Well, I'll give you a punchline. She said, why is it that all of the would-be eligible bachelors I date are like my girlfriends with dicks? What's going on? So, I mean, he was a man's man. So it was interesting. And we were doing that. But you see, basically, I couldn't be there any longer. I was over 65. And I just said, what the hell, I can retire. And they wanted me to take an IOU for tens of millions of dollars that they had effectively embezzled, because we had people that were early and mid 30s that were the executives in charge of the show, but they couldn't claim anything that they invented. They already were stuck with a fait accompli, so they were trying to siphon money off to set up all kinds of other stuff that flopped. And what I found out, and this is a little trick, if you're working for a big company, buy a few shares of stock so you can get the corporate news, well, the stockholders newsletter, and that will really tell you what's going on. So I was looking at something that was saying CBS has unprecedented 14 straight quarters of increased profits, and the last 4 have been the most profitable in the entire history of CBS. And one of the primary reasons is the Judge Joe Brown show, which has extremely low overhead and generates enormous revenues. So I'm looking at that, and they were either lying to me when they said, oh, well, you know, your ratings are down and everything's down. And I said, or they were lying to FCC or FTC, Federal Trade Commission, which will get you 10 years in a federal penitentiary. And I got the corporate newsletter and they have to make the announcements. I said, you're lying because you just got a raise 2 months ago and this is what you're making. That's what I said. No, it's not. And your raise was, how'd you know that? I said, because I'm a stockholder and I get the newsletter. So you're lying. So when they started doing it, I said, you stole it. I had a lawyer on it, but something strange happened to him. He had been doing good work. He had never lost an action against CBS. And then he disappeared. A law office asked me if I'd seen him. Family member asked me if I'd seen him. His law office returned checks that I'd sent, paying on expenses. It's like, what happened to the guy? He just sort of fell off the map. So, wow. It is what it is. Now, I'm not as wealthy as I used to be because the ex got most of it in a 4-year-long California divorce, but you know, it was what it was. Still got enough tucked away to be comfy, you know. But, you know, they run a game that they want to deal with because they have an agenda. They brag on LGBTQ that 8 to 9 out of every 10 people that work in Hollywood are gay, lesbian, bisexual, or trans, or pedophile. And see, there's a big thing about pedophilia. An example, Shirley Temple, black and white movies in the 1930s. Cute little girl, always wore these short skirts, always sitting on some old man's lap. Well, guess what her agency's name was?
I don't remember.
Kitty Porn Inc.
What?
That was the name of her agency that these child actors work for. Kitty Porn. That's back in the 30s.
You're kidding me. Oh, Lord.
Remember the scene again in The Godfather where the stand-in for Frank Sinatra is being blackballed by Hollywood, so the gangsters are staking out the director, big studio boss's place, and the little girl comes out stumbling, holding on to her mama because she can't walk because she's had sex with him, and they wind up putting the horse's head in the bed with him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's been going on for a while, so that's no joke.
Wow.
That's a thing. And the casting couch is alive and well, but it's boy on boy and girl on girl. It's not
what we think. It's not the simple stuff. It's the complicated.
Yeah. I have reason to think the old time way worked. My headquarters were in a building they call the Plantation Building that's on the Channel 5 Channel 5 station lot in LA on Sunset at Van Ness right before you get to the 101. And when they renovated it and took the sheetrock off of the wall, we found a staircase and it went down to a series of underground tunnels that had directions. And it was Cecil B. DeMille's old office when it used to be Warner Brothers. And it was saying Theda Bara, Marlene Dietrich, and they had stairs up into the bungalows where he could go knock it out with nobody looking. So it did happen, but you know, old yellow paper taped to the wall, and the tape was coming off and it was coming down, but we had a good laugh at it. So the casting couch was real. Now, don't get me wrong. They have a right to do whatever in the devil they want to do in the bedroom. But they are into politics, and the Democratic Party has become an adjunct of the worldview of some of them that is poison to healthy families, men, women, and children. And in particular, it exposes children to perverted sexual exploitation. And Biden, I can't stand him anyway, disclaimer. He says that an 8-year-old should be allowed to determine if he wants to become transgender. How the hell does an 8-year-old become that knowledgeable? He hasn't even had a good hard on, let alone learn what Nookie is all about. You know? You still there? Can you hear me? Hello? You there? Hey man, everything seemed to have locked up on this end. Maybe we were saying something somebody doesn't want us to deal with. First Amendment again. You there? You there?
Hey,
We
yeah, yeah,
disappeared, didn't we?
yeah. I think I
Well,
think
let me just say this. Every time I come up to that subject recently, no matter whose forum I'm on, it stops. So there you go.
they're watching, they're listening.
Yeah,
Well,
so they have a right to do what they do, but you see, it becomes politics. It's just like all white people aren't bad, but they used to be Democrats back 100 years ago, and they supported segregation and slavery and the Klan. Okay, the Republicans used to be the party of black people, but then they drifted off somewhere else, and now things have changed. The Dixiecrats were angered that black people had insinuated themselves into the Democratic Party, and they left and went to the Republican Party. Now, most of them are dead because that was 50 years ago. So the Democratic Party has accepted not so much gay folk, but those who have a political view expressed by LGBTQ, and now they've become the Demogatic Party, like they were the Dixiecrats. So I guess it's time for black people to do an exodus, to go somewhere else, a Blixit, so to speak, black exit,
Yeah,
Um,
that makes sense.
But I don't care what you do in the bedroom. In fact, I can tell an interesting story. I had a case back 1979. It was a jury trial. I represented the male defendant. There was a female co-defendant. The jury was going to have to decide whether they were guilty and whether they'd get 3 to 15 years in the state penitentiary. You know what the crime was?
What was that?
Okay, I'll lead up to a little bit. Funny. The guy that I represented had had this house for a long time. He got married, stayed married about 4 years. He and his wife broke up. She was required to move out and give him all the keys. She didn't give all the keys. She was going to go by and steal some papers out of there. So the guy had a new girlfriend. Girlfriend drove to his house. They parked around the corner. They walked in. They were doing their thing. So the estranged wife takes the key, goes in. She finds the defendant that I represented and the female defendant going down on each other. They were engaged in 69. She rushes out the door angry. There's a cop driving down the street. She flags him down. He goes in, busts my client and the woman for unnatural sex acts, 3 to 15 years in the state penitentiary. So I'm selecting a jury. I'm the lawyer, right? And this white guy on the jury said, Jesus Christ, lawyer, is that the truth? You mean if I was giving my wife some head and she was giving me some head, we could go to jail for 3 to 15 years? I said, yes, sir. That can't be true. The judge chimed in, sir. The court assures you that that's what we're here for. 3 to 15 years, everybody's going, oh, hell, man. So it was kind of a fun-filled trial, and the jury exercised what they call jury nullification. And of course, they acquitted them, but they changed the law about 4 months after that. But you see, that's what I mean about you got a right to do whatever you want to do in your bedroom, as long as you're not killing somebody or torturing them. Well, hell, But
but
when they try to bring that out, and you got folk walking down the street in a parade with their butts out, penises out, looking not even burlesque, just obscene. If it was straight people doing it, everybody would be up under the jail. If it's got a rainbow flag, then it's okay. See, again, the pigs are more equal than others, which is a bad thing. Now, one problem I have is about the severe insult they do to women. The drag queens always come across with a burlesque of what women look like, garish, too much makeup, looking like madam in a whorehouse, which is insulting to women. And from having gone through this in the 60s about what I'm going to say now, Black people had very low self-esteem in the 60s, beginning of the 60s. We engaged in a conscientious campaign to resign. Power to the people, right on. Ungawa, black power. I'm black and I'm proud. James Brown didn't start that. Okay. What I see now is a people who are pushing this agenda, who hate themselves, they hate what they are, and they hate what they want to be. So they're expressing a lot of self-hate. They call it a gay pride parade, but it's a gay burlesque, and everything that is grotesque about what they're doing is prominently displayed. That doesn't express pride. That's like if black folk had a black pride parade and they dressed up like Aunt Jemima or Bojangles or put on blackface to look like minstrels, that's what they'd be doing. That's not pride. That's self-hate coming through unconsciously. And we've got enough problems. The thing that I'm looking at right now is the suppression of this Bill of Rights is probably the most important thing to come out of this in this election. You see it. There is another thing that is important for young black people to understand. In about 20 or 25 years, there's no longer going to be a majority race or ethnic group in the United States. Everyone will be a minority. It's time to set up some coalitions. Now, interestingly enough, conservative whites and blacks are on the same side of this fence this time. We have two enemies. We have the old line so-called white supremacy, which is not a good thing. But we have this LGBTQ BLM thing that is dedicated to the suppression of straight manhood, the destruction of the nuclear family, promotion of this pedophile thing that exposes children to some very bad things. So we actually have a same set of values that we ought to use to cooperate, because this new crowd is using the friction and the confusion generated by our opposition to white supremacy and the residuum of white supremacy within certain white people to create confusion, which is camouflage for what they're doing. Now, if you look into it, you will find, for instance, that when we had that government shutdown last year, various committees were meeting overtime and at long hours to get together and craft legislation for the LGBTQ cause. You see, the Equality Act, it was Booker. It had been introduced by Conyers 23 years ago, and it kept getting tabled. Well, this time it got tabled. You saw Jesse Smollett, I call him Juicy Jesse, take that lynching thing, and then on cue, Kamala Harris and Cory Booker get the act relabeled as the anti-lynch bill, and then it passes in the House on a voice vote with no debate. Fortunately, the Republican Senate is holding it up. I read the act, the proposed act. It doesn't mention lynching once in there. It does not mention black people once in there. It adds a lot of the clinical language that I used to see on psychiatric reports when I would have pedophiles who had engaged in child molestation, child rape, etc., evaluated pursuant to sentencing. So add 3 or 4 more words in there and you've legitimated pedophilia. And what they're doing is putting that in all across the board. They're taking a sex act choice to be a new category of protection. Now, I know all of the stuff
Judge
that
Brown,
they have.
I can't hear you.
Oh, we got cut off again. Hello. Man. Censorship. Here we go again.
Yep.
See where they cut us off? This happens all the time.
Your fault. But you know what? If that happens, just be patient. I'm here.
I know. I've learned a way that came back. But you see, they do that all the time when I'm on and I get to that subject. Now, as I said, it's their right to do it. But the point of the exercise is that we have to do something to turn that back, because it's just not good. It promotes violence. It promotes children without direction. It is shameful that somebody is doing what they're doing. We have a thing where Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram have become the equivalent of the soapbox that Americans used to stand on at a park or on a street corner to harangue the public about political matters. Now, a couple of years ago, you remember when Trump blocked all these people who were giving negative comments to his tweeting? Well, the plaintiffs took it to federal court, and their final ruling was along the lines of, this is a public forum. The president cannot block them because they are entitled to exercise free speech, and you cannot stifle public debate on a public forum. Well, guess what? They were smart enough not to try to go all the way to the Supreme Court too hard on it. So that is a precedent. If this is a public forum, First Amendment debate is in question, then Twitter, feuding upon Americans' First Amendment rights to vigorously discuss issues because they think it's not a valid point. That is what the Nazis did. See where we go with this? Suppression of the Bill of Rights. And that is one of the more dangerous things out there. It is also why whites and blacks ought to collaborate on these things, because it's universal. Family, manhood, womanhood, children.
There you go.
And when you have some entity that is in a misguided fashion delivering an attack upon family, manhood, womanhood, children, then everybody can do something about that, because the family is roughly defined the same all over the world and always has been.
Well, you know what, Judge? I'll tell you, I think you hit the nail on the head. And I love listening to you. Everybody who watches this channel knows I don't think I've ever had an interview that went 2 hours and 18 minutes. But I can listen to you all day. In fact,
we've gone too long. You gotta
no, but you know, the only reason I got to stop is because I got to go pee. But I tell you, Judge, this everybody who's watching, this is what happened. We were at Tariq Nasheed's conference, the Foundational Black American Conference.
Yeah,
you started talking, and I was with Alicia. And I said, let me just go grab a chair and sit down. And I'm going to listen to Grandpa. Tell me another story. Not to call you, but you know what I mean. Like it was great to hear somebody that just has that wisdom and you're not afraid to express yourself. And you have a photographic memory. I mean, the man's a genius. If y'all haven't could tell that yet. So I love it. You know, and a couple things. One, I'd love to know if you'll come back at some point.
Yeah, sure. No problem. If they don't try to kill me in the meantime, but they've already tried that twice, so it didn't work. It was exciting, but you know, it is what it is. Now, yeah, I'll come back. Old man, got a lot of time, retired, you know, what am I going to do for a hobby? You know, hey,
I love
I'm out looking, trying to find me some honey, you know, 45 and up. Submit your resume, you know, we'll interview, performance interview, you know, we'll do what we can do, but you know, hey.
Do like Willie Brown, get you a Kamala Harris, huh?
No, I don't want a Kamala Harris. She was too young. See, that's like 45 and above is all right by me. 20s, no, they're children. I got kids older than that, you know. Besides, there's a thing about that. You know why some old men like these young gals?
What's that?
Scout, it's a joke that goes like this. Yeah, baby, that was real good. But you know, I had a long day today. Got an early one tomorrow. I gotta get on up. I left you a little something on the nightstand. You gonna call me, Daddy? Yeah, baby, I'm gonna call you. You know, hey, I promise I will, Daddy. You gonna call me for real? Yeah, baby, I'm gonna call you. All right, baby, call me again. Okay, I'm out of here. Now you get one of the women over 40 or something, go like this. Yeah, baby, I had a long, hard day today. Got an early day tomorrow. Oh, baby, where you think you're going? Well, you know, I got an early day tomorrow. Yeah. Yeah. What's the matter? Well, I mean, I had a hard day today too. Well, so did Mama. Now let me tell you something. You put that chain back on that damn door. Bring your ass back over here. Mama gonna get that flag flying at full mast again. You thought you wanted you some pussy. You gonna get you some pussy tonight. Bring your ass back over here. We got some more work to do. Oh, baby, oh, baby, just bring your ass over here.
Just do better. Your job performance is lacking, sir. You must finish the job. Well, you know what, Judge, I loved having you on today, and everybody in the chat, if you could give the judge a digital round of applause, let them know how much you appreciate them. Also, around here, Judge, we are what we call hashtag B1. That stands for Black First. We are Black First. And that's why we love you so much. And everybody also hit the thumbs up button. Take a second, please hit the thumbs up button. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. And I want to give a thank you actually to Mo. Mo actually booked this, Maurice Mo Duncan. His company is mobookings.com. Mobookings.com.
Yeah, Maurice Duncan. Yeah, he called me up 3 times a day to make sure I was in on this. He's a hard-working brother. He's working out of Atlanta. He's setting up a business. You should patronize him. He's real hard-working. Yes. Good young man. And by the way, you can find me on Twitter at Judge Joe Brown TV. It is me. Even if you don't think the judge should be saying this, I'm not sitting by this case now. This is my personal opinion, and I don't give a damn. But I'm at Judge Brown. I'm at Judge Joe Brown TV, and I do not have a blue check.
There you go. Oh, wow. Well, you should. You should. Yeah, y'all got to follow him on Twitter. Judge Brown is, if you're just looking for a different voice that's going to really to give you a type of truth that's backed by facts, by the way, that's different from mainstream media. This is somebody you got to follow. I follow you, Judge, and I love what you say. And I love the defense of manhood. I'm real big on that. You know, I had a real daddy who was a real man, and unfortunately, a lot of our kids don't have that. And so, you know, one of the things that Ice Cube and I actually talk about is we talk about what our daddies used to tell us about being a man. And we're noticing that is a lost art in a way that we don't, you know. And so what I'm finding is that a lot of young people are looking to the internet, and they're looking to men like yourself or myself or a Dr. Claude Anderson, et cetera, to just learn what does that mean to be a man, because they don't even know.
Tell Ice Cube, tell yourself, I got your 6. I'm watching out for you. See, I don't have too much longer to breathe anyway. And I had an episode 3 years ago where they had me on oxygen therapy, ICU for a week, and in the hospital for a month. That's a lousy way to die. It would be much easier to be shot to death and go quick. You know what I'm saying? So having been there, I don't want to go through that again. So I can take some chances, you know, and I'll back y'all up. At least you might remember me for a few years. That was bad, dude, man. Yeah, man. Yeah.
Well, we got your 6 too, Judge, and everybody let the judge know in the chat that we got his 6, we got his back, and we love him. And I know I love you, and I just there's nobody else on earth like you, brother.
Well, you got to pee, man. So let me get the hell out of here, you can go on and do what you got to do. Okay, I'm gonna hit leave right now.
All right, Judge. Have a good day. And, all right, and everybody, thank you guys for hanging out. It was real. Do me a favor, hit the thumbs up button before you go. Make sure you subscribe. Also, if you want to join us this weekend, we're having a conference for B1s. The All Black National Convention starts Friday at 5 p.m. You can get your tickets and your passes at allblacknationalconvention.com. That's allblacknationalconvention.com. Tariq Nasheed is going to join us. Rock Newman, Willie D will be there. Vicky Dillard will be there. A lot of experts on economics and wealth like Constance Carter, Julian Gordon, Lamar Tyler will be there. There will be some extraordinary people there, activists, everybody that's Black first. That's what this convention is all about. So if you'd like to join us, go to allblacknationalconvention.com. That's allblacknationalconvention.com. So take 1 second. Two things. One, hit the thumbs up button. Also share this video. Let people know. Like we've got to, like he mentioned, control of the media is very important. This is Black media. So make sure you're subscribed and also share, like you're our distribution channel, because we're up against a propaganda machine unlike any other. So thank you guys for hanging out. And this was great. And once again, thanks to Maurice Mo Duncan and MoBookings.com for hooking me and the judge up. It's been excellent. And last but not least, if you want a free e-copy of my book, It Takes a Village to Raise the Bar, I can give it to you. You have it totally free. You can go to allblackeconomics.com. That's allblackeconomics.com. So you can get the book totally free. So feel free to go to allblackeconomics.com. I'm out of here, guys. Have a good day. Thank you for listening.